Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited today about this special series of pairing cigars with wonderful
drinks.
Yes.
Yes.
Ken is with us here today, and he is our brand ambassador. And at the same time, he is very, very knowledgeable about pairing cigars with alcohol.
I'm sure coffee also. I like to drink.
Right. Yes. I'm sure coffee also,
In
but
short,
at least for now, we're going to talk about wine and whiskey.
Yes.
So the whiskey series will be later, but the wine will be now.
Nice.
Luckily, we started with that.
Absolutely.
So Ken, tell me a little bit about you and your experiences with wine.
Well, same as cigars, it started as a passion, as a curiosity, I would say, an interest, then develops as a passion, and next thing you know, you're stuck with it, and you love it, and you enjoy it. And because I do love cigars, and most of the times I drink more wine than anything else, I tried to find excuses to pair one with the other in a way that, was pleasurable to me. Mm-hmm. And I do recognize that it's for some people slightly controversial because wine is not necessarily your intuitive. It's not what you think of when you think of enjoying a cigar. Coming from a country like the Dominican Republic, where it's tabaco y ron, cigars and rum. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting challenge, and it's an interesting experiment, to combine something so different but so similar at the same time. Because when we speak about tannins, when we speak about intensity, when we speak about, there's many of the things that we use, or the descriptors that we use for cigars, that we can also use for wine, and find somewhere in between where they can collide and pair.
And for this video, you decided to use Rioja red wine.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit why you went with this.
Well, when you said we were going to smoke La Historia, I thought about some experiences I had, especially with this fantastic wine from Rioja in this particular cigar. The wine I chose is called Remírez de Ganuza. In this case, it's a red wine from the region of Rioja Alavesa in Spain. Famously very recognized for producing beautiful wines with the grape Tempranillo.
Okay.
Tempranillo could be a little bit similar like Cabernet Sauvignon, depending on the style of production, but think about a red structured grape that gives beautiful wines, and wines that can be aged, but they can also be drunk fresh. And it allows winemakers to do many different styles with that grape. In this particular case, I chose a fairly young wine. This is a vintage of 2016, which means there will be a certain level of freshness and fruitiness, and it's going to be more amicable, I would say, than a more structured red wine. So that's something that I've paired in the past with the suppleness and the kind of like sweet notes of our San Andrés wrapper, mm-hmm. with La Historia, and I think it goes fantastically, especially for the first 2/3 of the smoke. Because yes, pairing wine with cigar could be a little bit tricky. You might find a wine that goes fantastically with the cigar for the first half of the cigar, but then as the cigar evolves, you might encounter yourself with a bit of a conundrum. What do I do now? Do I continue and push the boundary with my wine? Or do I, change for another drink, something that will provide me with a different profile of flavor and aromas to pair with the power and the intensity with the cigar as the combustion moves forward or backwards. You know what I mean?
That sounds like a future video to me.
Probably, yeah. That's probably
going to be exploring a lot of wines.
Yeah.
When you're back in March. Right now, you live in London, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And tell us a little bit, I guess, about what exposure you've had over the years with learning how to pair. I'm sure that you started, maybe someone taught you, or maybe you were curious, but there might have been some bad pairings along the way. What were you looking for?
Absolutely.
What type of we were talking about sweet with sweet, spice with spice. You were also talking about the different ways that they can complement each other, even though they might not be exactly the same type of flavor.
Yeah. Well, certainly there is a gigantic level of subjectivity to this, but there's some fundamentals that we can try to follow to understand at least some rules and then break the rules.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So in terms of pairing, whether you're pairing wines and food or wines and cigars or whiskey and cigars, there are a few fundamentals that could be followed. Number one, you can absolutely pair two elements, a drink and a cigar, by contrast. Making a pairing that it will be enjoyable because of the differences between what you're smoking and what you're drinking. At the same time, you could do by similarity, where the component unifying the drink and the smoke will be the similar things that they have in common. The most basic pairing that I can think of, that is one that many of us have done in the past, is combining red meat with red wine. The thing is, when you have a nice piece of steak and it's greasy and salty and it coats your mouth with a lot of oil and deliciousness, and then you combine that with a wine like this, like a red wine, which is astringent and tannic and intense, and it just dries your palate out of that oiliness and fat from the meat. It creates a beautiful pairing by contrast, because you have two elements that are completely opposite to each other, interacting in your palate, making a fantastic experience. So that's one of the basics that we can apply to this. And, you never learn everything. Every day you will discover new things. Like I discover with you every time I smoke a cigar with you. Sometimes you think, okay, this might work. This drink might work with this cigar. You try it out. Next thing you know, it doesn't work. I don't know why.
So even someone like you who knows a lot,
100%.
It's 100%. It happened to you.
Yeah,
and it happened along the way.
And I'll say to people, I encourage people to explore, because sometimes things that are not supposed to work, all of a sudden you go like, wow, try this and this and tell me how you feel, and you'll feel amazing. Understanding that palates vary from person to person. It's a very intimate process. I cannot say that what's pleasurable to you is pleasurable to me, and vice versa. So all those things considered is a fantastic journey to discover.
And how about where you live? That's why I brought up London. Do you find that there's a lot of differences there? Do people pair wine with cigars more, less? You've been to a lot of different countries.
Yes.
Are there some countries that you notice it happens more than others? That's
an interesting question. I would think that because many of our cigar lovers of Carrillo, for example, are in the UK or in other countries in Europe, and they tend to drink wine on a daily basis, most of them, by default, they don't even think about it. They're having a glass of wine, a bottle of wine, and smoking a cigar.
Okay.
There's not even there's not even like an intentional, or it just happens.
Because here there's a lot of the rum,
yes, of
the
course,
bourbon,
absolutely, 100%, yeah,
whiskey, and wine. While I do see it more and more, does take kind of a backseat.
I guess so. I guess also that comes with the fact that, for some reason, wine has been glorified to an extent where when you're enjoying wine, it's mostly about the wine. For me, it's always about the person. If I'm the one eating, smoking, and drinking, it's about me and what brings pleasure to me, not about what I'm smoking or drinking or eating. So I think the approach is different. I agree. And of course, in our countries in the Caribbean, as you know, in the DR, whiskey and rum tend to take more of a leading, it's more common to do that with cigars, but definitely in Europe you can see a lot of wine and cigars happening. And even we have many of our cigar fans and Carrillo fans in the Middle East that many of them don't even drink alcohol, and they love to have their cigars with hot chocolate or with coffee or with mocktails or you name it, or with nothing.
Absolutely. I
know people that will say, no, when I'm smoking my cigar is a moment between me and my cigar. I want nothing to interfere with it. So I think there's a flavor for everybody.
Absolutely agree with that. Now, are there some other regions that you think are comparable to this type of, that grow grapes comparable to this?
Yes.
So that maybe we can list some alternatives.
Yeah, I think
as well.
We should have some fun trying some other stuff. For example, I'm really interested in trying maybe some American wines with some of our cigars. Especially maybe with Pledge would be a very interesting one, with something red, big, and bold from the US, mainly California. Napa could be, that could be interesting. But absolutely, if you look at the spectrum of flavors and aromas in wine, and you look at the spectrum of flavors and aromas in cigars, it's very similar. You can go from cigars that are very nutty and light and creamy and gentle to cigars that are a meal, that are very structured, complex, lots of flavor, lots of intensity, etc. Same with wine. You can go from the light and fruity and crispy, mineral and all that stuff, to the big, heavy, loaded wines that I'm a fan of. For example, Petit Verdot, which is a grape that I really like, but it's a grape that makes wine that are for people that really like structure.
Okay.
Because drinking a bottle of Petit Verdot done in a proper, strong way could be rather challenging. So yeah, there's something for everybody. We can explore a little bit of that. Maybe in the next, in the series, we can take a few spots of that spectrum and play around with the cigars and see what happens.
And which grape would you say is comparable to the Tempranillo?
So I would say in that line, you can speak about Cabernet Sauvignon, for example.
You said that.
You could think of blends because the same way Ernesto mastered the art of blending tobacco, Mexican tobacco, Dominican tobacco, Nicaraguan tobacco. In wine, we have amazing blends of Super Tuscans, for example, which have Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in the blend, and Malbec in the blend. So that's another story. That will make you feel things that are hard to describe, but they're bigger than the sum of the small components that make the wine. That would be really cool. So blends like that, blends that have Merlot, because I would think Merlot and Malbec are grapes that make the wine more amicable. So even in structured wines like Cab, like Syrah, it makes the wine a bit more approachable. So super cool to have a test with that. And I would think also, if you want to go to the full spectrum, you can play with Nebbiolo from Italy, which is a very particular grape because it will make wines that are not necessarily heavy in color. So you look at them and you will think that they're quite nice and amicable. The moment you sip, you go like, oh my God, there's so much structure here. So there's a lot to explore there as well. We can have some fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Definitely.
A lot to learn here. So stay tuned for more. Our whiskey video is up next. And really looking forward to talking about that. And then further along our series, we're going to be exploring more, as Ken said, and during his visits to the US. So stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe so that you can learn all there is to learn about wine, whiskey. What do we have coming? Rum, bourbon, maybe even a coffee. Why not? You love coffee.
Absolutely, yeah. I've
Stay
had like
tuned,
5
guys.
today. Anyway, cheers. Salud.
Jet lag.
Yes, absolutely. Cheers.